So it's Warwick Johnston here. I'm going to run you quickly through MarketView, and we've added a new feature which I want to focus on particularly because we dive in deep into individual panel retailers, panel manufacturers, and present that information just to you on an individual basis. So what you're going to see today is redacted. What this chart here shows is the number of clients on PVCell using each of these brands. Colors we can't reveal at this point, but can show you if you subscribe. And what you can see here is that some panel manufacturers are losing a lot of potential customers. So 15 customers within our PVCell ecosystem have switched away from this panel brand, even though their actual total capacity hasn't fallen off so much. So there are others in that situation too, and then there are some which have trended up both in terms of customer numbers and capacity installed. Quite a dynamic situation, which I'll come back to on a regular basis in this presentation. Now, then what we do is go and look at PV retailers that are using that specific brand. Let's call it brand X, and we can see that 3 months ago there were those combination of PV retailers were using 45% of their volume was going through using that brand. However, that has dropped down to 29%, and instead they've come and used some other different brands, most notably this one, which has jumped from obscurity into matching the same level of volume as your brand. And there are others that have lost market share as well to note. You can also identify whereabouts systems are being proposed that are using your brand, and that can be useful if you're wanting to put, make sure you've got distribution in the right area and servicing considerations as well. Then we go and look at individual PV retailers that are using your product, and of course what other products they're using as well. And so these are the ones that are just using your product. Each bar represents an individual PV retailer, and we're not revealing which are the other panel manufacturers that they're using. But you can see in this case, this panel manufacturer we've pulled out is dominated by one PV retailer, but then there's a long tail. Now there are some here where they've got a foot in the door. This is volume in the last 90 days, but they've got a lot of volume being used by another alternative, and it might be an easy ones to substitute and see if you can win back that retailer somehow. And then there are others that are using small volumes of your product and large volumes of others as well. So we then switch across to identifying PV retailers that aren't using your product and identifying what they're using. So this can be helpful to understand what mix of panels that are out there on the market and what mix a PV retailer might use, and being able to jump into having a look at those. We can also have a look at distribution of system size. So how your distribution of system sizes that are entered into PVCell compares to the rest of the market. And so you can see here, pretty much very common levels of residential, but generally your brand tends to be underrepresented in commercial up until the point where you get into those larger systems, and then it's particularly overrepresented. So the panel that you're selling is being well used in commercial would be the takeaway from that. Let me come back and share then the rest of the slide deck that comes out each month. This is content which isn't specific to any particular panel brand. This actually shows the market share by all the different panel brands that are of note for a particular month in PVCell, and that's across the entire market. Then we then break it down into residential market and the 10 to 100 kilowatt market, the 101 to 1,000 kilowatt market, and then there was one big player in the megawatt scale. We then look at just identifying what proportion of market goes in for each brand. So each of these bars is one brand. Here's where you can see there's a particular brand that had over 50% of their capacity go through as a proposal of over a megawatt. And so that was the one we saw just on the previous slide. But there are some which are dominated by residential sales volume. So interesting to know where you stand in comparison on those fronts as well. This chart, again, we're not revealing which of the company names, but you can see the market share of weighted capacity for over each of the recent 3 months. And this is where you can see there's one company here which just skyrocketed in terms of market share overall, and some which have fallen quite significantly back. You can also identify for individual PV retailers without, of course, we never reveal exactly who they are, but you can start to see switching behavior from one product to another represented within this slide here. We also go through into system pricing. So each of these bars represents the average pre-STC system price for a range of different panels. And so you can come and see how frequently your panel's been represented and what the average price is. But then we can go down and break that down into distributions. This shows for individual panel manufacturers the upper, lower, and median system price in dollars per watt before subsidy. And so one of the things you can start to see is what that distribution of price looks like for your panel brand and how it compares to other panels. And you'll note the much wider distribution on this panel brand, indicating that some people are selling at a high price, some people are selling at a low price, even within the same panel class, versus this more premium panel, which has actually got a tighter distribution. We can break that down by individual panel brands and then the inverters that they've been used with, and in the case where there's no inverter being specified, they're in that middle column. So you start to get a feel for the variation in price when your product is being used with different inverters, and see the influence that that has on system pricing, and some metadata there as well. Then we're back to this slide. So I'll leave it with you there. Hope you enjoy subscribing to MarketView, because you're going to get a lot of value out of this. It really does reveal a lot about a very intense, competitive, dynamic environment.